Before this day began, before the sun had any reason to rise, before the morning decided to exist at all, God opened his eyes in heaven, and the first name he called was yours. Not a general announcement, not a list read out loud in order of importance. Your name, spoken once, deliberately. The way a parent walks into a quiet room and finds the one child they have been thinking about all night, not because the others don't matter, but because something about this one requires a different kind of attention today. You didn't earn that. You couldn't have. It happened before you did anything, before you succeeded or failed, before you made the right choice or the devastating one, before anyone on earth had the chance to hand you the story you've been carrying about yourself. God started his day in heaven by calling your name first. And if something in you wants to push that away right now, if a quiet voice is already saying that can't be me, I want you to stay with that feeling, because that resistance is exactly what this message is here to address. Before we go any further, I want to tell you what we're going to walk through together today, because what's ahead is worth staying for. By the time we reach the end of this video, you are going to understand why the hardest season of your life was not punishment, it was preparation. You're going to discover something about your own mind that science has documented but very few people ever hear. And you're going to receive a truth about your name, your real name, that nothing that has ever happened to you has the authority to change. Stay until the end. What's waiting for you there is the part that changes the foundation. Now let me ask you something. There is a specific kind of tiredness that has nothing to do with how much sleep you got last night. You know the one. It lives somewhere in the chest, a heaviness that has been there so long you have almost stopped noticing it. You wake up, and it is already waiting. You move through the day, and it rides alongside you through every meeting and every meal, and every conversation where you smile and do what is required. And then, at night, when the performance is finally over and the quiet comes back, it steps forward again. That tiredness is real, and it is not what you think it is. Most people believe that kind of tiredness comes from working too hard, or wanting too much, or failing too often. But I want to offer you a different diagnosis today, one that is more honest and ultimately more useful. That tiredness is the exhaustion of carrying a name that was never yours to begin with, a name that says, not chosen, a name that says, almost, but not quite, a name that says, maybe when you've done more, maybe when you've become more, maybe when you've finally accumulated enough proof that you deserve to be in the front row. You have been carrying that name for years. And here is what I want you to notice right now. Notice how you got here today. You didn't stumble into this message by accident. Something in you, something underneath the weight and the doubt and the fatigue, pulled you in a specific direction. Call it instinct, call it the spirit, call it the part of you that is deeper than your circumstances, the part that still knows something the surface has not yet accepted. The person who finds a message like this is always at a particular place, not a physical place, but a threshold. A point where the old story has finally exhausted itself and something new is pressing against the door from the other side. You have been at that door for a while now. Maybe weeks, maybe years, maybe you've circled it so many times you've memorized every wall, every corner, every draft coming through the crack at the bottom. Here is the first thing I want you to receive. The fact that you are still here, still seeking, still pressing, still refusing to fully surrender to the smaller version of your life that is not weakness. That is evidence. That is the fingerprint of something placed inside you before you had any say in the matter. People who have been genuinely forgotten, stop looking. You have not stopped looking. That means something. Now, I want to talk about the season you just came through, or the one you may still be standing in. The season where things didn't move the way you expected, where doors you knocked on didn't open, or opened briefly and closed before you could step all the way through, where people you invested in moved on, where you watched others receive effortlessly the things you were straining toward, and something in you, quietly, privately, in the hours when no one was watching, began to wonder if the universe had simply miscalculated when it came to you. I am not going to rush past that. What you walked through was real. The delay was real. The grief of unfulfilled expectation that is one of the most specific and under-acknowledged kinds of pain that exists, and it deserves to be named before we move past it. But I want to show you what was actually happening underneath the surface of that season, because what looked like abandonment from the outside had a completely different structure on the inside. Every wisdom tradition that has ever existed on this earth, every one of them contains a version of the same pattern. The ancient Hebrews called it the midbar, the desert, not a punishment, a preparation, not evidence of being forgotten, but evidence of being assigned. The wilderness does something that no comfortable season can accomplish. In comfort, you learn to rely on what is provided. In the wilderness, you discover what you carry that no one can take away. The chosen one in the wilderness is not simply enduring, they are being made. The impatience is being metabolized into steadiness. The need for external validation is being slowly, sometimes painfully, dissolved, because what is being constructed in them is a foundation that cannot be built while everything is going well. It can only be built in the pressure. Think about a tree that grows in rocky soil. It cannot grow the way a tree in soft ground grows, fast, wide, easy. It has to fight for every inch. But the roots it develops, reaching down through rock to find water, those roots go so deep that when the storm comes, it is the only tree still standing. You have been growing those roots in ways you cannot yet see, in depths you will only understand when the storm arrives, and you are the one still standing. Now I want to bring you to the first revelation of today. Somewhere along the way, and this is true for nearly every person who is drawn to this kind of message, you absorbed a belief that you were invisible. Not metaphorically, actually invisible. As if your prayers dissolved into silence. As if your effort moved through space without landing anywhere. As if there was a list somewhere and your name kept getting passed over. Here is what is actually true. You have never been invisible. Not for a single moment. There is a name in the ancient Hebrew texts, El Roi. It translates as the God who sees. It appeared for the first time not in a palace, not at a mountaintop, not in a moment of great triumph or public faith. It appeared in a desert, spoken by a woman named Hagar, who had been sent away, who was sitting alone by a well with no plan and no path forward, who had been told by the circumstances of her life that she was disposable and her story was over. And in that exact moment, not when she had earned it, not when she had proven herself, not when anything in her situation had improved, she was fully, completely seen. She gave God a name that had never been used before that day. Not a name for power, not a name for provision, a name for seeing. Because that was the thing she needed most, not a rescue, not a reversal of every hard thing, just the knowledge that she had been witnessed, that none of it had happened in the dark. Chosen one, that name belongs to you too. Every night you held a question that had no answer. Every morning you got up and tried again without any visible reason to believe something would be different. Every moment of faithfulness in the small and invisible, the moments no one saw, the moments you didn't even give yourself credit for, those moments were witnessed. Completely, without a single one being missed. The silence you experienced was not the silence of absence. It was the silence of a surgeon who does not speak while working, because the work requires a level of attention that speech would interrupt. You were being worked on, in places you could not see, in depths you could not access, in ways that will only make full sense when you look back from where you are going. The seen person and the forgotten person do not look the same, not eventually. And the evidence that you have been seen is not in what has been given to you yet. It is in what has been sustained in you while you waited. Something kept a capacity for hope alive in you in places that should have extinguished it entirely. Something preserved your ability to believe, to reach, to find a message like this one on a day like today. That does not happen to people who are forgotten. That happens to people who are being kept, and we are only at the beginning of what today holds. Now I want to show you something that lives at the exact intersection of science and everything you have always suspected was true about yourself. Think back to when you were very young, not a teenager, younger than that, before the world had time to teach you what to be afraid of and what to be ashamed of, back when you were still fully yourself, before the editing began. Do you remember how you learned things? You made connections between things before you could explain how. Ideas arrived, whole, not built piece by piece, but appearing completely, as if they had been waiting just outside a door that opened without warning. You had moments of knowing something before you had any logical reason to know it, and the world felt charged, alive, full of signal, as if everything was connected to everything else, and you could almost feel the threads. You probably don't feel that way very often anymore. And the reason why is one of the most significant and least discussed findings in modern neuroscience. When researchers began mapping the brainwave activity of children versus adults, they discovered a pattern that appears consistently across study after study from institutions including MIT, Harvard, Stanford, and Princeton. In early childhood, the brain operates predominantly in a frequency state called gamma, the highest, most complex brainwave pattern the human brain produces. This is the state researchers describe as peak integration, the state where different regions of the brain are communicating with each other at their maximum capacity, producing creative insight, rapid learning, pattern recognition, and what many describe as an almost effortless sense of flow. Children live in this state naturally. It is not something they practice. It is not something they earn. It is simply their native frequency. And then, somewhere around the age of 7, a process begins that neuroscientists call the decline effect. The structures of modern life, standardized education, social conformity, the pressure to perform and comply and contain these experiences, compounding year over year, systematically shift the brain away from gamma and into lower, quieter states. States that are sufficient for survival, states that can carry you through the day, but not the state you were born in. Not the state where synchronicities happen, not the state where answers arrive, not the state where the world feels charged and connected and alive. Dr. Robert Lake, a neuroscientist with more than 3 decades of research into what is called brain entrainment, the process of using external audio frequencies to guide the brain back into specific states, has spent years developing what his team calls a gamma reactivation protocol. Drawing from research at Princeton, Stanford, Columbia, and the Einstein Center in Berlin, his team produced a 7-minute audio track that uses brain entrainment technology to bring the brain back into gamma coherence, not gradually, not after months of practice, but beginning from the very first listening session. 7 minutes, headphones, eyes closed, that is the entire protocol. What thousands of people who have used this have documented is not just a cognitive shift, it is a shift in how life feels. The quality of decisions improves. The sense of alignment returns, the feeling of moving with something rather than against it. The coincidences that used to feel rare begin to feel ordinary again, the way they did when you were young. In the spiritual tradition, there has always been language for this, the idea that you were wired by God before birth with a specific inner capacity, a God-given frequency, that the pressures of the world did not destroy but did suppress, what the mystics described as a divine inner light, what the ancient texts pointed to as the breath of life placed inside a person before they had done anything to deserve it. What if that frequency has a name in science? What if the gamma state, documented, measurable, reproducible, is part of what was placed in you before you arrived? For the chosen one who feels drawn to explore this, I have placed the only verified link to Dr. Lake's work, called The Genius Song, in the description of this video and in the pinned comment below. I want to be transparent with you. There are counterfeit versions circulating audio files that carry the same name but do not contain the actual entrainment technology, just ordinary sound with no effect. The only way to receive the genuine protocol, with all 4 companion resources included and the full money-back guarantee in place, is through the specific link I have left below. This is not a requirement. It is a door for those who feel ready to walk through it. And we will return to what we were building together in just a moment. Because there is more. There is still something deeper I need to show you. I want to introduce you to a concept that will change the way you understand your own name. In ancient Hebrew, the word for name is Shem, and the meaning of that word cannot be fully contained by the English translation. In the ancient world, a name was not identification. It was not a label placed on a person the way you might label a jar on a shelf. A name was essence. A declaration of what something fundamentally is, not what it is called, but what it actually carries, what it was made to do, what was placed inside it before the world ever had a chance to comment. When God called your name before this day began, before your circumstances, before your failures, before the story other people wrote about you when they weren't feeling generous, He was not simply identifying you. He was declaring your essence. He was calling into existence the fullness of what He placed inside you before any of the diminishments began. And here is where this becomes very specific, very practical, very personal. Every chosen one carries a burden that was never theirs to carry, a false Shem, a name given to them by someone who was in pain, or by a system that needed them smaller to function properly, or by a long series of experiences that added up to a conclusion that felt logical and coherent and deeply, profoundly wrong. You know the names. You are too much. You are not enough. You don't belong here. People like you don't receive things like that. You're the one who holds everything together for everyone else, and no one holds things together for you. You're the one who waits. You're the backup plan. You're the almost. Those are names. They have been answered to for a long time, but they are not your name. The name spoken over you in heaven before anything, before the day, before the story, does not contain a single one of those words. And the work of the chosen one is not to earn their way into their real name. You cannot earn something that was given before you existed. The work is recognition, the willingness to look at the false name clearly, to call it what it actually is, to stand in front of it and refuse to answer to it any longer. This is not a metaphor for positive thinking. It is not an instruction to simply believe harder. This is an ancient practice. The Desert Fathers called it discernment, the discipline of recognizing which voice is speaking and whether it has any legitimate authority over you. Modern psychology calls it narrative identity, the understanding that the stories we carry about ourselves are not neutral descriptions of reality. They are active prescriptions, and they determine what we pursue, what we refuse, and what we believe is possible for someone like us. You have been answering to the wrong name, not because you were weak, because it was placed in your hands before you had the framework to evaluate whether it was true. Today, you begin to return it. Now everything comes together. I want you to sit with the word at the end of this title for a moment. Before, God started His day in heaven by calling your name first. Before. Before what? Before the day you failed. Before the relationship that broke you open. Before the season where nothing moved no matter how hard you pressed. Before the voices that handed you the false name and watched you accept it. Before you made the wrong call, or the right call at the wrong time, or the call that made complete sense given what you knew and still cost you more than you had. Before any of that, you were named, you were called, you were seen, you were chosen. And here is the thing that is almost impossible to fully absorb the first time you hear it. Nothing that has ever happened to you can reach that place. Not the failures, not the delays, not the seasons of silence, not the people who looked at you and chose someone else. None of it has access to the before. There is a difference, a fundamental, life-altering difference between a person who believes they are building toward worth and a person who knows they are living from it. The first person is in a permanent negotiation with the universe. They are always presenting evidence, always accumulating success and goodness and proof of their value, always trying to finally reach the threshold where they can rest and feel like they belong in the front row of their own life. The second person knows that the front row was given before they arrived. They still work, they still grow, they still walk through every wilderness season that comes. But they do all of it from a different place, a foundation that is not built on outcomes, not threatened by delay, not collapsed by failure. Because the foundation is not what they have done. The foundation is what was spoken before the day began. Chosen one, this is the shift I am pointing you toward. Not a feeling, not an emotional high that fades by next week when the circumstances return to what they were. A foundation. The quiet, settled, bone-level understanding that your name was spoken first. That it was spoken with full knowledge of everything you would face and full intention about who you were made to be. That everything that has ever tried to tell you otherwise was working from a limited vantage point that did not have access to what was true before the day began. You cannot earn this. You cannot lose this. You can only receive it. And receiving it is not a single moment. It is a practice, a daily return to the truth when the false name tries to step forward again, a daily choice to live as someone who was called first. Even on the days when nothing visible in your life is corroborating that yet. The stability that comes from this is not the stability of everything going well. It is the stability of knowing you are held by something that existed before the problem began. That is the kind of stability that outlasts every season. That is the foundation the chosen one was always being prepared to stand on. And now I want to close our time together in a way that honors everything we walked through. If you are willing, take one real breath right now. Let the chest actually expand. Let the shoulders drop a little wherever they've been holding. What you carried into this time, the weight of the false name, the tiredness of trying to earn something that was already given, I want to ask you to consider setting it down here. Not because it wasn't real. It was real. Every bit of it was real. But it is not the defining truth. The defining truth was spoken before any of it existed. We give thanks today for the seasons that felt like silence and were actually surgery. For the doors that stayed closed and protected you from rooms you were not yet ready for. For the mornings you got up anyway when you had no visible reason to, and something in you kept going without knowing why. We acknowledge everything that was carried, every question held in the dark with no answer in sight, every moment of faithfulness that no one saw and no one applauded, every small act of not giving up when giving up would have been so much easier. It was all witnessed, every single moment. Now, in this space, we release the false name. We release the story that said you were second. We release the comparison that measured your timeline against someone else's and found yours lacking. We release the ceiling built from someone else's limitation placed over your life. We release the belief that you must prove your way into belonging somewhere you were already placed. We release the version of you that was built for survival because it was never meant to be permanent. We release it. We call forward now the full version, the one who sees what others cannot see, the one who carries light into confused and darkened spaces, the one who speaks what others feel but cannot find words for, the one who ends cycles that were never supposed to continue into this generation. We call forward the divine connections that belong to this season, the right people, the right doors, the right timing. We activate what has been held shut by disbelief. We cover what is being built. We guard what is rising from being pulled back down before it is ready. What has been lifted, let nothing return it to where it was. And now from that place, slowly and without shouting, with the quiet certainty of someone who has just touched a foundation that does not move. I was called first, not last, not eventually, not when I earned it. First, before the day, before the struggle, before everything that tried to name me something smaller. I am the first thought, not the afterthought. I am called by a name that was spoken before my circumstances had any right to define me, and I am living from the before. It is done. It is settled. We receive it. And so it is. If something landed for you today, if a moment in this video found something in you that needed to be found, I want to invite you to do one thing right now. Type the word before in the comments. Not for anyone else, for you. As the first small movement of a person who is beginning to live from a different foundation. If the conversation about the gamma frequency resonated with you, the science behind what your mind was designed to do before the world quietly dimmed it, I have left the only verified link to Dr. Lake's work in the description below and in the pinned comment. Not as an obligation, as a door for those who feel ready. And share this with someone who has been answering to the wrong name for too long. There is more ahead. There is always more for the one who was called first.